name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about the novel Gulliver's Travels, written by Jonathan Swift. Now, this novel is very interesting, and before I go into summary and explanation of this novel, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or leave a comment so that the channel can continue to grow. This book begins with Gulliver. He's at home. We quickly meet his wife and kids, and he doesn't really have that great of a relationship with his wife and kids throughout the novel. He goes on these number of adventures, and then he comes back home for a few weeks. Then he's gone again, and we really just get a glimpse into his family life, and that he's basically gone all the time. Gone all the time. He doesn't really stay home. We also learn in the beginning that he is a surgeon. He's a doctor, and after learning the whole thing about his family dynamic and the fact that he is a doctor, he goes on his first adventure, his first trip. Um, he wasn't planning on going to the land of the Lilliputians. What happens is that while he's at sea going to a destination, there's a storm that takes place, and he's shipwrecked, and he lands on the land of the Lilliputians. And the Lilliputians are these small creatures, standing about 5 to 6 inches tall, and they tie him up. They take him as a prisoner, which is quite funny because compared to them, he's a giant. He's huge, um, and he doesn't break free. He stays as their prisoner. They take him, and he eventually becomes a part of their army, and he fights for them. He becomes a military arm of the Lilliputians. The Lilliputians have this war going on with their enemies over boiled eggs, over the breaking of boiled eggs, which is really funny and really interesting that these people are literally fighting their enemies over boiled eggs. There shouldn't be wars over boiled eggs. Um, and it's quite funny because Gulliver does end up being a part of this battle. He does end up being a arm of the Lilliputians in this war. So he stays there for a while. What happens is what really gets the Lilliputians to start disliking Gulliver is the fact that there was this huge fire, and during this fire, Gulliver, the only way he could think of extinguishing this fire is to pee on the fire. Now he does this and he saves a lot of lives, but the Lilliputians were very mad and upset with him because they find that appalling, the fact that he peed on their kingdom to save it. Even though he saved a lot of lives and saved a lot of property, he still did a horrible act, which really didn't sit well with the Lilliputians. So the Lilliputians have him as a prisoner, and things really go down for Gulliver. And eventually, what happens is the Lilliputians decide they wanted to blind him and starve him to death, but Gulliver he hears of this and he escapes with the help of a Lilliputian that was on his side, and he escapes. He builds this like makeshift raft, makeshift boat, and he escapes the seas. He goes back to England. So he goes back to England. He stays there for a while, and then he sets up. He goes on another adventure. The next land he goes to is called the land of the Brobdingnags, and the Brobdingnags. It's this land that has giants, and when he is shipwrecked there, he is kind of like paraded around because he is small compared to these giants. These giants are huge. They're massive compared to him, and they take him as kind of a unique thing, and they just want to prounce him around, show him off. People are taking, spending time with him because it's a small little human being compared to them, and they're all giants standing at several feet tall. So they find him amusing. They build him this little tiny house. They give him clothes, chairs, all things like that. And it's really interesting and funny how just an adventure ago, he was this giant in the land of the Lilliputians, but here he's just this insignificant, very small thing. What happens while he's with the giants is that he's very appalled. The giants, they're huge, so he can see all the blemishes on their skin, and they kind of look like craters. And he is disgusted by how they look like. He kind of thinks to himself, he probably looked the same way to the Lilliputians because when he was a giant, they probably could see the craters and blemishes on his skin, and those blemishes probably looked like horrific craters. So he stays with the giants. He's appalled by how they eat. These creatures are huge, so when they eat, they're going to look like animals devouring entire, city blocks. So Gulliver is just appalled by these giants. He's not happy. He's being attacked by animals that are, you know, extremely bigger than him, and he's not happy. So at first, he kind of like is interested in seeing this land and seeing these different types of people. He talks with the leaders, trying to get it, kind of gets their ideas when it comes to philosophy and politics. But after all this happens, he still wants to go home. And the little box that he had as a house during one day while his nurse or like his kind of like his caretaker was showing him around, walking with him. This bird comes out of nowhere and steals the box, and the box lands in the middle of the sea, and he gets picked up by a ship. So, he leaves the land of the giants. He goes back to England for a while. People thought something happened to him, but nothing happened to him. So he stays there for a while. His wife is like, maybe you shouldn't go on these trips no more, anymore. And he thinks about it for a while, but, he does it anyway. He goes on another trip. And after this, he lands on the island, the flying island, the floating island of Laputa. Laputa is this country slash island where all of the creatures there they have flaps to communicate. They communicate with these flaps, and Gulliver had to learn how to speak their language. Little by little, he learns how to speak their language, learns how to communicate with them, and he sees that all of these creatures they love math, and everything that they do, their entire kingdom is governed by the rules of math. So it's an interesting kingdom in terms of math, in terms of seeing what math can do. But other than that, it's not really that exciting there. So he stays there for a while. Then he goes to another side adventure. One thing to note with Gulliver's Travels is that there's four main adventures, and then there are side adventures during the main adventures. So big adventures, and then little adventures inside the big adventures. So one of the little adventures that he goes on is where he goes to this place where he gets to talk to dead spirits, dead famous people, and he asks some questions. And another thing that he gets to do is goes to this land where um, there are these people that never die; they're immortal. But the problem is, um, although they never die, they continue aging. At first, Gulliver thought that it was cool to never die, but when he learns that they keep on aging to the point where their bodies become these prison cells, because even though you're fully aware of yourself, the fact that you keep aging, your body keeps crumbling, and your body starts to fail and starts to shut down. Eventually, at some point in life of your eternal life of not dying, your body's going to give up and stop working, but you're still going to be alive. So you're going to be isolated and alone in your own body, and your own body becomes your prison. So in this side adventure, he sees what's unique and different with these people, but then he realizes that it's nothing that he wants. So after this, he goes back to England. He goes back to his wife and kids for a little while. Again, guys, there's a pattern here. It's adventure, home, adventure. So so after being home for a while, Gulliver goes to his last huge adventure, and he lands in the land of the Hulums. Again, one thing that I should mention here is that every time that Gulliver goes on a trip, something always happens that get him to these lands. It's either a storm, a shipwreck, pirates taking over the ship that he was on, and he lands in a land that he's never seen before, a land that nobody has ever seen before, and he just explores it himself. So the last huge land that he goes to is the land of the Hulums. The Hulums are horses, and these horses are very intelligent. They have a blissful society, no wars, no fights. They don't have wars like the Lilliputians. They're not overly um, they're not admiring mathematics like like the land of Laputa. The people in the land of Laputa, they're not giants undermining him. It's this land of horses where all these horses get along. They live happily. They have food to eat. They have shelter, and everything is blissful. These horses don't have wars. They don't have debates. They don't have disputes. No debacles. No anything like that. It's just they're all living happily, and Gulliver is just he wants to be a part of the society. He wants to be a part of this community, but he can't be because the Hulums, they see him as a Yahoo. The Yahoo is basically the humans and the land of the Hulums that look like humans. They are humans, but they're not sophisticated. They don't think. They don't have any. Um, they basically don't have any high level mental capabilities. So they fight each other for the most meaningless things. They kill each other over the most meaningless things. And the Hulums have no hope for them. They just see them as savages. So while in the land of the Hulums, Gulliver kind of like loses his respect for humanity because he just sees humanity as these savages, as these creatures who really don't know how to live. Because the Hulums, to him, the Hulums um, are the perfect example of what a society, of what people should be, or what horses should be. Because these horses completely get along. There's no disputes and it's just bliss. They have their own version of philosophy, their own version of life, and everything is just perfect for them. Um, and so when the Hulums ask Gulliver to leave, because first of all, he looks like a Yahoo, he looks like one of the savages that exist in the land of the Hulums, and the Hulums really don't want um, Gulliver to stay because he reminds them of the Yahoos, and he's not a horse. So they do ask him to leave. He leaves the island. He leaves the country of the Hulums, and he goes back home to England. And he kind of like lives his days bitter because he really wanted to stay in the land of the the Hulums. He wanted to be with them. He wanted to live amongst them because they were just living in perfect bliss. So really the novel ends there. He goes back home. Um, his wife thought he was dead, but no, he's alive. He's welcome back. He takes his place in his home, and he kind of lives in, you know, he's unhappy because he wanted to be with the horses. He wanted to be with the Hulums, and he looks at regular human beings. He looks at the other people in England, the Englishmen. He just looks at everybody around him as yahoos when he gets back home, and he doesn't like them as much. So the book really ends there, and that really concludes um, Gulliver's travels. Um, Again, one thing to keep in mind with this book, it's multi-layered. There's a lot of satire within this book. This book really pokes at politics when it was being written with England and the wars it was having with other countries. And it kind of says, a lot of these wars were pointless, and this kind of goes back where the Lilliputians were having wars over boiled eggs and the cracking of boiled eggs. It's kind of senseless and makes no sense. And Jonathan Swift is kind of saying that these countries and kingdoms are going to war with each other for things that make no sense. Um, and to him, the perfect society is the Hulam society because they all get along, they all get what they need, they all meet their necessities, and all of their necessities are met, and they're perfectly happy. But the land of Laputa, uh, Brobdingnag, and the Lilliputians, they all have their particular problems, and they're just things missing. With Laputa, it's just math. It's just math. Math is great. Math is wonderful for understanding the universe. But the fact that the Laputans, that's all that their land was about, it made it very um, narrow, very isolated, very just one dimensional, and it was just not the best place to be. Brogning um, the land of the giants is just they just looked down upon Gulliver, and they just saw him as a toy, as a pet. The Lilliputians just use him as a military weapon, but the Hulums treated him um, as as a human being, or just as a being. They respected him while he was there. They gave him shelter. They gave him food, and they tried to understand him. And they didn't try to kill him or keep him or sell him or take him captive. They kind of like brought him to their society and try to understand him. So that's the book. That's the ideas that are portrayed in it. That's what my views on it. It's a really interesting book to see the different lands and to see the different cultures that are represented in this book. Um, and it's really interesting to see how Gulliver reacts to all of the things that he sees in this book, and it's very interesting also to see the politics and the satire that Jonathan Swift throws in here. And it's expected from Jonathan Swift. If you read A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, you know how he can use satire to really get his point across about what he believes about a certain issue or topic. So that is my review and summary of this book. Thank you for watching. Again, leave a like, subscribe, and or a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.